let us talk about what we must be prepared to do, because we, the British public, must be prepared to brave the battlefield and fight for our country if NATO goes to war with Russia. So suggest reports commented by the Chief of the General Staff of the Army, General Sir Patrick Sanders. Our full-time army currently stands at a somewhat puny 75,983, but that's set to fall to 72,500, and the Navy and the RAF are struggling with recruitment and retention too. I'm joined now by retired British Army officer Major General Tim Cross and TalkTV's international editor Isabel Oakeshott. Very good evening to both of you. Thank you very much for joining us. I mean, recruitment is at an all-time low. I've been quite shocked, Tim, to hear today that an awful lot of people, particularly young people, don't seem to think the country's worth fighting for. They think that the government's not very good. They think that the country is in a terrible state. And they don't really fancy actually going to war to save it.
Yeah, well, I have a certain amount of sympathy with them because the media, amongst others, continually throws out that we should be embarrassed by our history, that particularly white young men are, not the favoured child, and that people are embarrassed about all sorts of aspects. I mean, recruiting is very poor, but it's linked, I think, to the fact that the government have been reducing the size of the military now for quite a long time, since the end of the Cold War, obviously, but even in the last few years. We've come down from around 105,000. So the message going out to younger people is this is not an organization that is expanding, it's reducing, and therefore opportunities for career and so forth in the military is probably not what it was before. They are a different generation. I don't go along with this idea that they are, not as good as previous generations, but they're a different generation. They're receiving different messages, and recruiting is definitely suffering. I have to say partly because I don't think it's been well handled by the company that have got charge Capita, who took on responsibility for recruiting some years ago.
Well, I think it may well be as well that things have all taken a bit of a turn for the woke. Let's talk to Isabel Oakeshott. Isabel, thanks very much for joining us. I mean, one of the problems I would have thought that the Army and the armed forces in general suffer from is that they've been infected, like the rest of the country, with this kind of diversity and inclusivity mantra, which has meant that they've had to hire loads and loads of people that might not be as good at what they supposedly will be doing, and it might put an awful lot of people off. I mean, I've seen a lot of comments today from people saying, well, they don't really want young British men to do anything male or in any way masculine, so it's hardly surprising. Maybe we should just fight with all the rest of the people that they like so much to recruit.
Well, I'd like to make a link with the news item that you carried earlier about the pianist who was confronted by the policewoman because a bunch of Chinese people with stupid placards took it upon themselves to say that in our country we shouldn't be doing what they didn't want us to do, with the very great irony that China is one of the most highly surveilled states on the planet. Right. And yet our police saw fit to actually reprimand the pianist, the British pianist, who was entertaining passengers in the station, and he wasn't apparently allowed to say, this isn't China, which is just a statement of fact. Right. Now, why is that relevant to the conversation we're having? Well, because if you're asking people to sign up and put their lives on the line potentially, they're entitled to ask the question, for what and for whom? And we have so lost sight and any sense of our national identity, of who we are, and complete disunity has taken over because we have imported at a completely unprecedented rate people from so many different cultures that I think it's going to become very difficult, increasingly so, to persuade people to sign up for these jobs, which are still an amazing career, when they're just not sure what they would be potentially risking their lives for, who we are anymore.